The only reason I remember the exact time, March 8th, 7:23 a.m., is because that's when the copy machine started making this god-awful grinding noise like it was chewing rocks. The smell hit next, burnt toner and desperation. Right then, my manager Steven called across the office. "Chuck, can you check why these vendor reconciliations aren't matching again? Like it was some big mystery instead of the same weekly circus where numbers got massaged until they looked pretty." I'm Chuck Pearson, 48 years old, been pushing numbers around this place for 12 years. Not the guy who volunteers for company picnics or posts motivational quotes on LinkedIn. Just clean spreadsheets and a quiet war with whoever keeps adjusting the thermostat. My desk sits near the fire exit, which tells you everything about this company's priorities. I didn't answer Steven right away. I was watching that copy machine sputter like it had secrets to spill. Fitting, really. This place had more buried problems than a landfill with a PR department. People here talked about synergy and transparency while booking phantom vendor calls and making budget overages disappear like David Copperfield in a cheap suit. A few months back, HR rolled out this shiny professional development program. Big email campaign, fancy slides, the works. Grow your skills, become your best self. Read like a shampoo bottle for your resume. Thing is, nobody really monitored who used it. No oversight unless you were trying for a full MBA. So I clicked the link and quietly signed up for a $49 webinar on detecting vendor fraud. Then another, and another. Turns out nobody watches the finance nerds when the sales team is lighting cigars with expense reports in Vegas. Over 8 months, I stacked up forensic accounting modules like playing cards. Didn't brag about it, didn't update my LinkedIn. Steven once called Excel that calculator thing, so you can imagine how much he cared about my continuing education. The courses were actually pretty interesting. Started with basic stuff, how to spot duplicate vendors, unusual payment patterns, that kind of thing. But then I got into the advanced modules, shell company identification, money laundering red flags, authorization chain analysis. Each course built on the last one, and before I knew it, I had more fraud detection training than most junior auditors. I was just watching and learning. That's the thing about working in finance for 12 years. You start hearing the whispers before the storm hits. An extra zero here, a vendor name nobody recognizes there. Most people ignore it. I didn't. I saw it all and logged it quietly in my own spreadsheets. Then last fall, our old CFO retired and the company brought in Ashley Bradford. Fresh out of McKinsey, all sharp angles and corporate speak. The kind of person who says, "Let's take this offline," right before she guts your department. Bradford moved fast, killed 5 teams in her first month, called it operational efficiency. The rest of us called it Tuesday. I kept my head down, but I was watching. Every payment, every revised contract. The finance system wasn't built to hide fraud. It just didn't care if you buried things deep enough. But me? After all those courses, I cared plenty. I knew what to look for now. One Tuesday in late January, I noticed something odd. A payment batch labeled Strategic Consulting Services, $28,742. No vendor code, no matching contract. I pulled up the vendor master file. Nothing. Checked procurement records. Blank. Then the next week, another one for $31,900. Same pattern. Payment approved, no backup documentation. I flagged both in my own tracking spreadsheet, didn't email anyone. Why bother? I wasn't the type they promoted. I was the type they forgot still had access to the back-end systems nobody else bothered learning. Plus, at 48, I was starting to feel invisible around here anyway. The new hires were all fresh-faced kids who thought pivot tables were some kind of magic. So I kept taking my little online classes, reading about shell corporations and procurement fraud, learned about invoice factories, ghost employees, kickback schemes. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Because I knew eventually they'd come for me too in one of these restructurings. They always do. And when they did, I wasn't going to beg. I was going to be ready. The first real flag came disguised as a consulting expense. Vendor name, Pinnacle Business Solutions. Never heard of them. No one had, no contract, just a vague memo. Q1 operational review. Amount, $86,400, paid in full. 2 weeks later, another payment, $93,000. This time tagged Talent Optimization Framework. Those course modules started clicking in my head. Red flag number 1, vague service descriptions. Red flag number 2, round number amounts. Red flag number 3, no supporting documentation. It was like somebody had taken my homework and turned it into a real-world test case. I walked over to Steven's desk. "Hey, you know who approved these Pinnacle payments?" He blinked like I'd asked about quantum physics. "Bradford handles vendor approvals now. Part of the new efficiency protocols. No contract review." "I don't ask questions I don't want answers to," he said with a nervous laugh, then went back to scrolling LinkedIn like it was a magic 8-ball for job security. That's when I knew Steven was scared too. 12 years I'd been here, and I'd never seen him this jumpy. Bradford was cleaning house, and we were all just waiting to see who got the axe next. I went back to my desk and ran a deeper search. 6 vendor names I didn't recognize, all recently onboarded, all payments flowing through Bradford's direct approval chain. No statements of work, just invoices with buzzword-filled memos like strategic pipeline enhancement and cross-functional optimization delivery. The training was paying off. I could see the pattern now, clear as day. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with lukewarm Chinese takeout and my forensic accounting printouts. What was supposed to be homework for a certification quiz now felt like reconnaissance. Each course module clicked with real-world patterns I was watching unfold, like learning a second language and realizing your company had been whispering threats behind your back for months. The advanced modules had taught me about clustering patterns, how fraudsters typically use multiple shell companies to spread risk. So I started mapping the vendors. Pinnacle Business Solutions, Summit Advisory Group, Apex Management Consulting. All had the same invoice template, same payment terms, same vague service descriptions, different names, same smell. I pulled up the vendor master files and started cross-referencing addresses. That's when things got interesting. Pinnacle's business address matched a landscaping company in Delaware. I checked the state incorporation records online, registered just 4 months ago. Summit Advisory was registered to a P.O. box that, according to Google Street View, sat in front of a strip mall with a dry cleaner and a pizza place. But the real kicker was Apex Management Consulting. Their address was a residential property in Trenton, New Jersey. I ran the property records through the county database, owned by Jessica Bradford, Ashley's cousin, according to her LinkedIn profile where she proudly posted family BBQ photos. I almost laughed. Almost. But when you're looking at $4.2 million in potentially fraudulent payments, it stops being funny real quick. These weren't sophisticated criminals. They were just greedy people who thought nobody was paying attention to the details. The next morning, I started digging deeper into the payment patterns. Each vendor had received between 3 to 8 payments over the past 18 months, always in amounts just under Bradford's direct approval threshold of $100,000. Classic structuring behavior, another red flag from my coursework. I built a timeline in Excel, color-coded by vendor and cross-referenced with Bradford's start date. The pattern was beautiful in its stupidity. The first fraudulent payment went through exactly 6 weeks after she took over as CFO. Like she needed a month and a half to figure out how our systems worked, then started bleeding us dry. Then came the silence. My emails about vendor inconsistencies got slower replies. Eventually, they stopped altogether. I became invisible. HR stopped including me in budget meetings. Procurement marked my access view only. Even Steven got weird. "Bradford wants tighter circles," he mumbled, eyes darting around like he was afraid someone might overhear. You know what? Maybe it was my age showing, but I'd seen this dance before. New management comes in, cuts costs, eliminates the dead weight. Problem is, they usually define dead weight as anyone over 45 who might ask uncomfortable questions. I'd watched it happen to 3 different guys over my 12 years here. Good analysts, solid workers, but they had gray hair and opinions. In accounting, silence isn't peaceful. It's lethal. It means someone's hiding the trail and they don't want you following breadcrumbs back to the truth. I started printing everything. Every invoice, every payment authorization, every vendor upload notice. They thought nobody would notice the backdated vendor creation forms. They thought the system didn't log change history. They were wrong. One of those online courses had covered digital forensics, how to track changes in accounting software, how to spot when records get modified after the fact. My apartment turned into a war room. Stacks of files, highlighters, my laptop humming into the early hours while I mapped payments like a detective with string and push pins. My wife used to complain when I brought work home, but she'd been gone 3 years now. Divorce. said I cared more about numbers than people. Maybe she was right, but at least numbers don't lie to your face. What I found made my stomach drop. Not just the Jessica Bradford connection, but the whole operation. They'd been careful to vary the amounts, stagger the timing, use different approval chains. But when you laid it all out chronologically, it looked like a textbook case study in procurement fraud. Summit Advisory had supposedly provided strategic market analysis for Q3. I checked our actual market research contracts. We already had a $200,000 annual contract with McKinsey for that exact service. Why would we need a second firm? Pinnacle's operational efficiency review overlapped with a legitimate consulting engagement from Deloitte that was doing the same work. Either Bradford was the worst CFO in history, or she was running a kickback scheme with her family. Apex Management's invoices were the sloppiest. Cross-functional optimization delivery, what the hell does that even mean? I pulled up our org charts. We hadn't done any cross-functional work in months. Most departments weren't even talking to each other thanks to Bradford's efficiency protocols. But here's what really got me: the payment timing. Every fraudulent invoice got processed and paid within 48 hours. Our legitimate vendors, they waited 30 to 45 days minimum. Bradford was fast-tracking payments to her cousin while making real suppliers chase their money. I closed my laptop and stared at the wall. Something big was happening, and I was the only one who saw it. 12 years of watching this company's financial heartbeat, and now I could see the cancer growing in real time. The Whisper campaign started the next week. Corporate buzzwords about right-sizing and evaluating redundancies. Translation: we're looking for scapegoats. When Bradford's formal announcement hit our inboxes, the temperature in the office dropped 10 degrees. Subject line: internal controls assessment, immediate action required. Here's the kicker: finance was excluded from the process. The department that monitors the money wasn't allowed near the money review. Instead, Bradford assembled her own task force: procurement, HR, and 2 ex-Deloitte guys who once spent 20 minutes trying to figure out how to sort a spreadsheet column. They weren't there to find anything. They were there to look busy while Bradford torched the evidence behind them. That's when I knew they were coming for me. The training, the questions, the quiet investigation. I'd made myself a target. Time to get ready for war. Meanwhile, HR got real active. Mandatory form submissions, new expense policies, the works, including a spreadsheet of everyone who'd used the professional development program in the past year. I found my name on line 19, $2,147, across 14 reimbursements over 8 months. All approved, all documented, every receipt uploaded on time like a good little employee. I should have seen it coming, but when you're focused on following the money, you sometimes forget they're also following you. Tuesday morning, my badge didn't scan. I stood outside the glass door like an idiot, coffee getting cold, while an intern stared at me like I was Marley's ghost. After 5 minutes of awkward gesturing, someone let me in. I should have turned around right then. Instead, I walked into the HR conference room and met my firing squad. Patricia Wells from HR sat there with eyes too wide, trying to look compassionate, but landing somewhere in horror movie territory. Next to her, Ashley Bradford, not even pretending to drink the bottled water in front of her, just staring at me like I was gum on her quarterly bonus. "Please sit," Patricia chirped like we were doing a wellness check. I stayed standing. 12 years here, and they were going to ambush me in a conference room? Patricia cleared her throat. "We've reviewed your recent professional development reimbursements and found potential policy violations." "Potential violations," I repeated. The words tasted funny. She nodded like a dashboard bobblehead. "The courses weren't pre-approved by management, and we can't validate their connection to your job duties." Bradford spoke for the first time. Voice like a frozen stapler. "The optics are problematic, Chuck. Using company funds for self-directed learning outside your scope." "Outside my scope," I echoed. "I work in finance." "Yes, but forensic accounting, fraud detection." "That's not your lane," she said. The word fraud seemed to physically hurt her mouth. That's when I knew. They weren't just firing me. They were neutralizing me. Bradford hadn't stumbled across my reimbursements. Someone pointed them out. And she didn't bring HR here to mediate. She brought them to make it look official while taking out the one person asking quiet questions about her family business. I could have argued, could have pointed out that fraud detection is absolutely within a financial analyst's scope. Could have mentioned that I'd caught 3 legitimate billing errors in the past year that saved the company $50,000. But they were waiting for me to lose composure, say something they could use in an exit report. Instead, I smiled. Not a happy smile, the kind you give when you know something the other person doesn't. "So I'm being fired for getting too educated?" Patricia jumped in. "Not fired. Your position has been eliminated due to restructuring, but we're offering a generous severance package." She pushed a manila folder toward me. "Your severance agreement. If signed today, you'll receive 2 weeks additional pay." Bradford added, "You'll also agree not to access or retain any proprietary financial data post-termination." There it was. The gag order dressed up as legal boilerplate. They wanted me gone and quiet. I nodded, picked up the folder, slipped it into my bag next to my reusable coffee mug, the same mug I'd filled every morning while reviewing vendor transactions these clowns had no idea were still traceable. "I understand completely," I said. Crystal clear. I didn't say another word. Walked out like I was heading to lunch, stopped by my desk, grabbed my plant and my personal folder backup. Not the whole shared drive, just one zip file labeled Q4 reconciliation drafts. They'd overlooked it, probably thinking it was unfinished work. It wasn't. Buried inside were 6 versions of our quarterly statements showing the progression from clean books to cooked numbers, plus my personal tracking spreadsheet with 8 months of vendor analysis. They thought they'd fired a quiet, thorough finance drone. They had no idea they'd just handed a loaded weapon to the one person who knew exactly where the bodies were buried. I didn't cry when I got home, didn't pace or call anyone. Hell, who was I going to call anyway? My ex-wife would just say, "I told you that job would eat you alive." My kids lived across the country and thought Dad was boring. I walked straight to my apartment, dropped my bag, and turned on every light. No shadows, no room for doubt. This was war now, and I was finally ready to fight it. By 6:30 p.m., every surface was covered with paper. Bank transfers, procurement records, my handwritten notes from those forensic courses. I used a dry erase marker to map vendor shells across my bathroom mirror. By midnight, it looked like the FBI had raided a 1-bedroom apartment and left me as evidence. Here's the thing about corporate crime. It's not flashy. No duffel bags of cash or cartoon offshore accounts. It's a $72,135 invoice for pipeline efficiency consulting paid to a vendor with no LinkedIn, no website, no working phone number. It's $189,870 wired to a logistics solutions firm registered to a P.O. box that shares a tax ID with a coffee shop that closed in 2019. But when you've got the training to spot it and the motivation to prove it, those breadcrumbs might as well be neon signs. The forensic tracer tool I'd built during one of those online labs sang like a canary. Every vendor, every payment, every authorization chain mapped out in beautiful, damning detail. Pinnacle Business Solutions, Summit Advisory Group, Apex Management Consulting, all. Roads led back to Jessica Bradford's kitchen table in Trenton. I cross-referenced bank routing numbers, incorporation dates, even the damn fonts used on the invoices. Everything pointed to one conclusion. Ashley Bradford and her cousin had been systematically looting this company for 18 months. And they'd gotten sloppy because nobody was watching. Nobody except the boring 48-year-old analyst they'd just fired for inappropriate training. At 2:15 a.m., I took a break, microwaved another cup of coffee, and stared at the evidence taped to my kitchen cabinets. My walls looked like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream, except I wasn't trying to prove aliens built the pyramids. I was about to prove that greed, stupidity, and family connections had stolen $4.2 million from my former employer, and I had the receipts to prove it. By sunrise, I had the full fraud flow mapped out, 23 vendor payments totaling $4.2 million over 18 months, all approved under Bradford's authority, all routed through shell companies tied to her cousin Jessica, all flagged as strategic expenditures with 0 legitimate deliverables. I saved the file, backed it up to 3 different places, then backed those up to cloud storage. Paranoid? Maybe, but I'd watched enough corporate exits to know how fast access gets revoked when the tide turns. By 9:15 a.m., I'd showered, printed hard copies, and put on my good blazer, the one I wore to performance reviews back when they mattered. My apartment still looked like a crime lab, but that was fine. It was proof that something mattered enough to lose sleep over. I opened a secure Proton Mail account and attached an encrypted file. A Bradford Financial Irregularities. Documented evidence. The encryption was military grade, another thing I'd learned in those forensic courses. 3 recipients, the external auditor from Ernst & Young, the board's legal counsel, and the chair of the audit committee. Margaret Johnson, a woman who once froze a $200 million acquisition because someone misspelled indemnification in the contract. The email was simple. Documentation attached regarding verified misappropriation of funds linked to executive approvals. Requesting board-level review. I hit send. Then I waited. At 10:47 a.m., my laptop pinged. New message from hkimedie.com. Subject line, blank. Body. Can we talk today? Confidential line below. The man who answered sounded like he hadn't smiled in a decade. Voice like gravel and certainty. We've reviewed your materials, he said. They're credible and serious. We're bringing in federal counsel. Good. You'll want the complete trail. There's more. He gave me an upload link, not corporate cloud, something darker. The same system they used for healthcare billing fraud cases. A digital bunker, legally speaking. I spent the next 3 hours building the complete package. Not just evidence, timeline, context, annotations, vendor relationships, authorization chains, policy violations. Every footnote Bradford hoped nobody would read. When I uploaded the final file, it felt like launching a missile. At 1:45 p.m., another email arrived from a corporate address I didn't recognize. Mr. Pearson, we acknowledge receipt of your materials. Special board session convened today. May contact for clarification. Then quiet. I sat still for 10 minutes, not moving, just breathing. This was it. The moment when 12 years of watching numbers finally meant something. The next morning brought damage control. Company-wide email at 8 o'clock a.m. sharp marked internal communication, confidential. From people and culture, because apparently that sounds warmer than human resources. We'd like to clarify recent rumors regarding a former finance employee's departure. This was routine HR business, unrelated to any ongoing audits. We remain committed to transparency and respectful discourse. Respectful discourse. I laughed out loud. I'd seen more respect in a gas station argument over lottery tickets. Around noon, word filtered back through my old contact in accounts payable. Bradford had called emergency meetings, claiming all flagged vendors were overflow contracts from previous leadership, and any discrepancies were innocent misclassifications. Innocent doesn't work when the system logs show you uploading fraudulent invoices on Sunday nights. That afternoon, a courier delivered a black envelope to my apartment. Cease and desist letter from corporate legal. 3 pages of threats dressed as professional courtesy. The message, stop talking, stop sharing, or face litigation for misuse of proprietary data. They were trying to gag me with the same contract they'd used to hire me, except I'd already filed whistleblower protection with federal authorities. That gag order was worthless toilet paper. 3 days later, they arrived like ghosts. No announcements, no mass emails, just 3 people in gray suits walking past reception with clipboards and expressions that could cut steel. Ernst & Young's external audit team didn't need introductions. The office went dead silent by noon. Someone said one of the auditors had pulled Stephen into a room and emerged 5 minutes later without saying a word. Another rumor claimed procurement was told to freeze all vendor access pending review. Then the lead auditor, sharp eyes, voice like a fax machine, walked into Bradford's glass office without knocking and closed the blinds. Meanwhile, I sat on my couch in sweatpants, watching it unfold from a distance. That morning, my whistleblower contact had forwarded a time-stamped photo from the investigator's review room. My evidence spread across a conference table like pieces of a solved puzzle. By 3 o'clock p.m., the board had been summoned for emergency session. All 9 members present. Bradford not yet admitted. They were keeping her out, which meant they weren't buying her story anymore. The CFO was terminated Thursday at 9:43 a.m. Not resigned or stepped away for new opportunities. Terminated. 1 word in an all-hands email with no signature, no corporate fluff. By 10:05, Ashley Bradford was escorted out by security. Someone snapped a blurry photo of her crossing the parking lot with nothing but her phone, and that shell-shocked look of someone who'd finally learned they weren't untouchable. At 11:12, the real show started. Corporate legal filed formal disclosure with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Financial statements under federal review, vendor expenditures frozen, earnings guidance rescinded. My phone started ringing. Not just lawyers, departments inside the company I hadn't heard from in years. Senior forensic advisor position, flexible schedule, name your rate. Interested in leading the rebuild effort? Even Steven left a voicemail. If you ever want to come back, I'd vouch for you. For real this time. I didn't return the calls. Didn't hate him. Just didn't owe him my time anymore. Then came the call that mattered. 7:45 p.m. Private number. Board chair herself, voice precise and measured. You didn't just expose fraud, she said. You preserved us. Without your work, we would have walked into Q3 blind. The financial fallout would have triggered internal collapse. You saved us. 3 months later, I got my SEC Whistleblower Award, $180,000, plus a consulting contract worth more than my old salary. Best investment I ever made? That first $49 training course. Turns out, learning how to spot the truth pays better than hiding from it.